Hello and welcome. Today, we delve into a story that intertwines legendary aviation feats with revolutionary wartime innovations, an account of how one man's insight changed the course of the Pacific theater forever. Imagine an unassuming civilian, standing amidst the chaos of war, quietly transforming the very limits of aerial combat with nothing more than his experience and data-driven thinking. Could a simple request at a remote Dutch New Guinea airbase ignite a technological revolution? How did a man who crossed the Atlantic in a fragile monoplane in 1927 come to dramatically extend the range of America's fiercest fighters? And what secret techniques enabled pilots to fly 9 hours across enemy territory, their aircraft fueled not just by engines but by a new understanding of efficiency? An understanding pioneered by Charles Lindberg himself? Did you know that Lindberg, without formal engineering training, managed to double the operational radius of the P38 Lightning, turning what was once deemed impossible into routine? Could this civilian expert, dismissed by skeptics, hold the key to longer, safer, and more effective missions? And what about the fierce dogfight where Lindberg, flying in a combat role, engaged Japanese aircraft in a deadly dance of skill and daring, ultimately contributing to a victory that was kept unofficial, his first and only kill? How did his radical fuel management techniques, operating engines at settings forbidden by military doctrine, prove safer and more efficient than traditional methods? And what profound lessons about innovation, trust in data, and civilian expertise does this story reveal? Lessons that still resonate in military technology today. All these pieces form a single, astonishing puzzle, one that challenges assumptions about limits, leadership, and the power of relentless curiosity. In this video, we will trace Lindberg's journey from transatlantic pioneer to Pacific innovator, unearth the secrets behind his groundbreaking fuel-saving techniques, and explore how his insights extended aircraft range by hundreds of miles, transforming strategic possibilities in the largest theater of war. The most incredible part? The real revolution was not just in the aircraft, but in the minds of those who believed that mastery of knowledge, combined with courage, could rewrite the rules of war itself. And right now, the most extraordinary chapter begins, so stay with us. June 26, 1944. At Helandia Air Base, nestled within the vast landscape of Dutch New Guinea, a tense moment was unfolding amidst the hum of war machinery. A game of checkers, left unfinished, sat abandoned on a makeshift table, reflecting the quiet distraction from the chaos surrounding it. Lieutenant Colonel Charles MacDonald, the man overseeing this quiet corner of the base, lifted his gaze from the board, his focus drifting upward. Before him stood an unfamiliar figure, someone who had just introduced himself but whose name failed to cement itself immediately in MacDonald's mind amid the ongoing turmoil. The man standing at the door was trying to establish a connection, a conversation, a discussion about the fighting in the Pacific. Yet what truly caught MacDonald's attention was that this visitor was not just any civilian passing through, but someone with a reputation that transcended ordinary circles. Someone whose very presence at Helandia was extraordinary. The civilian's voice was calm, deliberate, and exuded a quiet confidence that momentarily broke MacDonald's concentration from their ongoing game. He introduced himself simply as Charles Lindberg. The name resonated deeply, yet its significance was not yet fully appreciated by either man at that moment. For Lindberg was none other than the legendary aviator Charles Lindberg, America's most iconic and celebrated pilot, the same man who had captured the world's imagination with his daring crossing of the Atlantic Ocean almost 2 decades earlier. Here, in a remote corner of Dutch New Guinea, thousands of miles from the bustling cities of the United States, Lindberg was seeking authorization, a simple request, to discuss matters that could alter the course of aerial combat in the Pacific theater. Neither MacDonald nor Lindberg could have foreseen, at that very moment, that this seemingly modest interruption would serve as a turning point, leading to revolutionary changes in long-range fighter operations across the Pacific battlefield. Over the next 6 weeks, Lindberg would impart techniques and insights that would extend the combat radius of the formidable Lockheed P38 Lightning by nearly 400 miles. This breakthrough would transform the perceptions of what pilots believed to be achievable in aerial warfare, pushing the boundaries of range and endurance far beyond previous limitations. It was a transformation from what was once considered impossible into what would become standard operating procedure, a real shift in tactical potential. The story behind how a civilian consultant, without any initial military engineering background, managed to double the operational range of America's premier twin-engine fighter aircraft is more than just a tale of technical ingenuity. It is a narrative woven with resistance and skepticism from entrenched institutions, which initially hesitated to accept this new approach. It is also a story of unwavering belief in the power of mathematics and data over instinct and tradition, an enduring lesson that trust in empirical evidence could reshape battlefield tactics and strategies. The crux of this transformation lay in the meticulous understanding and manipulation of fuel efficiency, an area where Lindberg's mastery would make history. His insights were not derived from engineering manuals alone. Instead, they were born from the direct, hands-on experience of pilots who learned that many established teachings about engine management were incomplete or overly conservative. What was at stake was nothing less than turning what was once deemed impossible into routine practice, a feat achieved by an unlikely instructor, a 42-year-old civilian who had flown the P-38 Lightning only 3 days prior to this encounter. The journey that led Lindberg to this pivotal moment at Helandia had begun nearly 17 years earlier, over the vast Atlantic Ocean. On the night of May 20th into the 21st of 1927, Charles Augustus Lindberg etched his name into aviation history forever by completing a solitary transatlantic flight of 3,600 miles from New York City to Paris in a mere 33.5 hours. His aircraft, the Ryan NYP monoplane named Spirit of St. Louis, was a marvel of its time, an open cockpit craft packed with 250 gallons of fuel in tanks so large they obscured forward visibility, forcing Lindberg to navigate using a periscope and dead reckoning methods. His fuel management during that historic flight was nothing short of extraordinary. Lindberg meticulously rationed and conserved fuel, managing consumption with a precision that would have seemed paranoid or overly cautious to other pilots of the era. Upon landing at Labor Field in Paris, he had remarkably only 85 gallons of fuel remaining, a feat that defied contemporary understanding of what was possible with a radial engine powered by a right-wind centrifugal supercharger. His careful fuel economy became his hallmark, a technical expertise that distinguished him from his peers. Throughout the 1930s, Lindberg continued to push the boundaries of what was considered achievable in long-distance flight. Conducting survey flights for Pan American Airways across the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, he refined techniques that allowed aircraft to extend their ranges well beyond the manufacturer's published figures. He understood, more so than many, that those published range estimates were merely averages, not absolute limits. Each aircraft, in the realm of early aviation, Charles Lindberg's pursuits extended far beyond mere record-breaking flights. He delved deeply into the intricacies of aircraft performance, mastering aspects such as revolutions per minute, mixture adjustments, and indicated airspeed with a level of expertise that surpassed typical pilot training. By the year of 1944, Lindberg had established himself as one of the leading authorities on long-range flight, recognized worldwide for his pioneering insights and technical knowledge. However, his professional reputation was complicated by his outspoken political stance, which leaned heavily toward American isolationism before the outbreak of the Second World War. Lindberg had been fervently opposed to the United States' involvement in European conflicts, voicing his concerns through vigorous advocacy for a policy of neutrality. He became a prominent figure within the America First Committee, which campaigned against American participation in the burgeoning war in Europe and across the Atlantic. His outspoken stance did not sit well with the Roosevelt administration. In fact, it earned him considerable animosity from President Franklin D. Roosevelt himself. On the 29th of April, in the year 1941, after Roosevelt publicly drew unfavorable comparisons between Lindbergh and Clement Vallandigham, a controversial Confederate sympathizer from the Civil War era, Lindbergh resigned his commission as an Air Force Reserve colonel, severing formal ties with the military. When, in December that same year, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and propelled the United States into full-scale war, Lindbergh sought to re-enter military service. Despite his desire, President Roosevelt personally intervened to prevent Lindbergh from wearing an American military uniform again during the war, ensuring that his previous political stances would keep him at a distance from active duty. Nevertheless, genuine expertise finds its own pathways, and Lindbergh's formidable knowledge of aviation technology and flight operations did not go unnoticed. Unable to serve as a military officer in an official capacity, Lindbergh instead transitioned into a civilian role as a technical consultant for aircraft manufacturing firms. In the year 1943, he joined the United Aircraft Corporation, where he made substantial contributions, especially within their Chance Vought division, known for producing the formidable F-4U Corsair fighter aircraft. His hands-on engineering expertise was also evident during his time at Ford's Willow Run plant, where he helped troubleshoot persistent production issues relating to the B-24 Liberator heavy bomber. Furthermore, he conducted high-altitude test flights in P-47 Thunderbolts, analyzing engine performances under extreme conditions. His technical input extended to the development of dive bombing tactics specifically tailored for the Corsair, enhancing its operational effectiveness. Despite his crucial technical contributions, Lindbergh's heart yearned for combat flight. By early 1944, he perceived an opportunity to combine his desire for hands-on action with his technical expertise. It was at this time that United Aircraft sought to evaluate the feasibility of a new twin-engine fighter aircraft, an endeavor that involved the only other American competitor in this category, the Lockheed P38 Lightning. Recognizing the potential for first-hand observation, Lindbergh persuaded United Aircraft to allow him to travel to the Pacific Theater as a technical representative with the primary purpose of studying P-38 operations under combat conditions. Preparations for this mission commenced on the 3rd of April in 1944. Lindbergh visited a New York City outfitter, Brooks Brothers, to purchase a naval officer's uniform, without insignia, intending to blend discreetly into the military environment. At Brentano's bookstore, he selected a small New Testament, writing in his journal that day that since he could only carry one book, that was his choice. Reflecting on his evolving approach to the war, Lindbergh noted that although it might have been unthinkable a decade earlier, his increasing knowledge and reading had diminished the competition's significance in his mind. Leaving San Diego on the 24th of April, Lindbergh was officially en route to the Marine Corps aviation bases in the South Pacific, primarily around Guadalcanal. The journey was authorized by the Navy Department but was kept a carefully guarded secret from the White House. Neither President Roosevelt nor Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox was aware of Lindbergh's imminent deployment to the war zone. What initially was meant to be an observation assignment soon transformed into something more significant when Marine Corps aviation officers extended an invitation to Lindberg to participate directly in combat missions as an observer. On the 21st of May in 1944, Lindberg flew his first combat sortie, a strafing run alongside Marine Fighting Squadron 222. Targeting Japanese positions near the strategic garrison at Rabaul. The Marines, accustomed to calling it merely observation, watched as Lindberg flew into combat with guns blazing, engaging targets whenever the opportunity arose. He quickly demonstrated not only his technical understanding of flight mechanics but also practical combat skills, engaging enemy targets with a level of expertise that belied his civilian background. His actions on that day showcased his innate flying talent, as well as his Lindberg's influence extended well beyond the realm of theory and theoretical concepts. He actively engaged with operational complexities on the ground and in the skies. Working intimately with Corsair pilots, he demonstrated how to safely take off while carrying bomb loads that were twice the maximum rated capacity of the F-4U fighters. This was no trivial matter, as the Marines had been experiencing frequent losses of aircraft due to incidents of overloading, casualties that could have been prevented with better knowledge of aircraft limits and procedures. With meticulous analysis, Lindberg examined the optimal power settings, takeoff speeds, and weight distribution, which resulted in a significant reduction of these dangerous accidents. Simultaneously, these improvements not only enhanced the safety of the pilots but also boosted the operational strike capability of the fleet, allowing for more aggressive and longer-range missions without risking unnecessary losses. News of Lindberg's hands-on approach and expertise quickly circulated throughout the vast expanse of the Pacific Theater, creating a buzz among both pilots and commanders. It was widely known that the legendary aviator was flying combat missions not as part of formal military duties but rather in a civilian capacity, using his considerable skills to address operational problems that had perplexed seasoned military pilots for months. His involvement was seen as a valuable resource, a form of informal but highly effective problem-solving. By the middle of June in the year 1944, Lindberg's interest was increasingly drawn towards the P38 Lightning, a twin-engine fighter aircraft that had garnered attention for its impressive specifications and combat potential. The interest of United Aircraft, the manufacturer of the P38, in twin-engine fighters was genuine and strategic. They recognized the Lightning's significance in the Pacific Theater where its range and speed offered distinct advantages. However, Lindberg had also been made aware of a particular unit, the 475th Fighter Group, commonly known as Satan's Angels, which had established itself as one of the most formidable Lightning outfits operating across the Pacific. This unit had a reputation for both excellence and aggressive tactics, and for anyone desirous of mastering the P-38's capabilities, it was the logical place to learn from the very best. On the 15th of June in 1944, Lindberg boarded a flight bound for Finchen, located in New Guinea, a strategic hub in the battle for control of the region. His arrival was deliberately announced to the headquarters of the 5th Air Force stationed at Nadsab, where Colonel Marion Cooper was the senior officer in command. Upon Lindberg's arrival, Cooper welcomed him and they shared a meal, a sign of the informal camaraderie that often characterized interactions within the challenging environment of the Pacific. A few days later, on that memorable Sunday evening of June the 18th, Lindberg joined General Enos Whitehead for dinner, engaging in discussions about the ongoing developments in New Guinea and, more importantly, his plans to observe the P-38 Lightning in combat conditions firsthand. The official approval for his observation and participation was informal, unofficial, and certainly inadequate according to rigid military protocols. Nevertheless, within the fluid and improvisational command structure that characterized the Southwest Pacific Theater, personal rapport, demonstrated competence, and the ability to adapt quickly often succeeded where formal paperwork fell short. Recognizing his expertise, the authorities granted Lindberg permission to undertake a more direct operational role. On the 20th of June, he spent an hour and 20 minutes undergoing a thorough checkout in a P-38 with the esteemed 35th Squadron of the 8th Fighter Group. It was his first time flying in the distinctive twin-boom fighter, an aircraft renowned for its unique design and versatility. Just a few days later, on or about June the 26th, Lindberg traveled to Helandia and paid a visit to Lieutenant Colonel MacDonald, a considerable figure in the theater. MacDonald, a 30-year-old veteran and a 10-victory ace, commanded the 475th Fighter Group, which had been activated in Australia on May the 14th of the previous year and had rapidly gained a reputation as one of the highest-scoring Lightning units in the entire Pacific area of operations. The group comprised 3 squadrons, the 431st, 432nd, and 433rd, each flying the latest P38J models, equipped with improved intercoolers and added fuel tanks that extended their operational range significantly. These Lightning fighters were among the longest-ranging aircraft in the Pacific Theater, capable of conducting missions that other fighters simply could not undertake. Nevertheless, even with the additional drop tanks, the P-38's operational radius was still finite, creating certain limitations. Long-distance missions inevitably left the pilots with very little fuel for maneuvering during combat, leading to dangerous situations where aircraft would return to base with dangerously low fuel reserves, sometimes risking being stranded or destroyed. Weather-related detours often compounded these issues, as pilots were forced to deviate from their planned routes and consume even more fuel, frequently resulting in the loss of aircraft when the fuel supplies were exhausted before reaching safety. Initially, MacDonald responded politely to Lindberg's interest, returning to his checkers game and seemingly dismiss as Lindberg settled onto the modest cot provided for him. News of his arrival spread swiftly and diffusely through the ranks of the squadron. The undeniable reputation of Charles Lindberg, now flying in the role of a combat pilot amidst a sea of wartime chaos, seemed to energize and intrigue everyone around him. This legendary figure was no stranger to the skies, yet the circumstances of his current mission in the Pacific dramatically contrasted with his earlier pursuits of long-distance flights over the Atlantic, making his participation a subject of intense curiosity and speculation among the soldiers. Lindberg was flying alongside what could be described as Satan's angels, the formidable fighters of the P-38 Lightning, the twin-engine marvel beloved by American pilots for its speed and firepower. The reaction from the squadron pilots was far from uniform. While some regarded Lindberg's presence with admiration and excited anticipation, others harbored deep skepticism. Lieutenant John Purdy, assigned to the 433rd Squadron, was among the latter, eager but also doubtful. He looked forward with great eagerness to an encounter with the legendary aviator, intrigued by the stories that had surrounded Lindberg for years. However, not everyone shared Purdy's enthusiasm. A portion of the squadron's veterans questioned whether a man in his early 40s, still a civilian at the time, known primarily for his historic non-stop transatlantic flight, could truly adapt to the brutal, rapid-paced demands of modern aerial combat. Major Thomas Maguire, an already accomplished fighter ace with 15 confirmed victories to his name and the second highest-scoring American pilot by the end of the war, accumulating a total of 38 confirmed kills, was among those particularly interested in witnessing Lindberg's raw prowess firsthand. McGuire wanted to see whether this aviation pioneer could hold his own amidst the chaos of contemporary warfare. On the morning of June 27, 1944, Lindberg prepared himself for his initial combat sortie in a P-38 Lightning, a formidable aircraft that symbolized American technological ingenuity. The day's weather conditions were less than ideal. Rain began to fall steadily shortly after dawn at around 5:53 in the morning. By the time the squadron was scheduled for takeoff at about 10:30, the rain had lessened, revealing a somewhat clearer sky. The mission was straightforward but dangerous, a patrol intended to gather reconnaissance information and harass enemy positions. Leading the four-plane formation was Captain MacDonald, with Lindberg assigned as Blue 3, positioning himself on Major McGuire's wing. The other aircraft was flown by Merrill Smith, a seasoned pilot who had achieved 8 confirmed victories. MacDonald kept a careful eye on Lindberg as he smoothly slid into formation, his handling of the aircraft appearing almost instinctive, remarkably precise, especially considering Lindberg had only recently completed his training in the Lightning. His command of formation flying was so flawless that it caught the attention even of the most experienced pilots. The operation involved strafing a strategic enemy barge anchored in Kaibos Bay, a target dense with anti-aircraft defenses and enemy fire. Lindberg's aircraft darted through the barrage with remarkable agility, unleashing a salvo of cannon and machine gun fire directly onto the designated target. His accuracy and daring contributed to the success of the mission, which concluded with all 4 aircraft returning safely to base, despite the perilous situation. Yet, what the ground crew observed after the mission would prove to be of greater significance than the mere outcome of the combat engagement. When the maintenance crews examined Lindberg's Lightning after multiple sorties, they made an astonishing discovery. His plane consistently returned with significantly more fuel remaining than any other aircraft flying the same missions. This pattern was not a one-time anomaly but was observed repeatedly across different missions. For instance, after a 6.5-hour armed reconnaissance on July 1, covering enemy airstrips along the western shore of Gilvink Bay, Lindberg landed with an astonishing 210 gallons of fuel still left in his tanks. Meanwhile, other pilots involved in the same patrol returned with their tanks nearly dry. Moreover, on the 3rd of July, the squadron escorted 16 B-25 bombers on a bombing raid against Jeffman Island. Following that, the Lightning pilots engaged in a more aggressive mission, the hunt for enemy barges. Within an hour, 2 pilots had to break off due to fuel concerns, but Lindberg pressed on, his gauges indicating ample reserves of fuel ready for continued flight. Major MacDonald, noticing these discrepancies, decided it was crucial to address this mysterious fuel economy. 2 days after Lindberg's arrival in the squadron, the commanding officer convened a gathering of all the pilots within the unit, an informal assembly held in a basic recreation hall. The facility itself was rudimentary, with dirt floors beneath a roof woven from palm thatch, a single ping-pong table, and some decks of cards forming the extent of the furnishings. Under the harsh glare of naked light bulbs overhead, MacDonald took charge and introduced Lind were performing adequately, with no immediate signs of overheating or trouble. As confidence grew, pilots gradually extended their flight durations, adhering carefully to the recommended parameters while monitoring engine gauges closely. Throughout this period of cautious experimentation, a sense of cautious optimism began to develop among the crew, as preliminary results suggested that Lindberg's unconventional approach might indeed offer substantial fuel savings without compromising engine integrity. Most of these early flights involved flying at the prescribed lower RPM of 1,600, with manifold pressure set at 30 inches of mercury, and the mixture adjusted to autolein, a setting previously considered risky under military protocols. Despite the initial wariness, the aircraft maintained a consistent airspeed of roughly 185 miles per hour, matching but not surpassing the typical cruise speed of standard settings. The pilots noted that fuel consumption decreased markedly, with each sortie burning approximately 70 gallons of fuel, translating to an extraordinary efficiency of roughly 2.6 miles per gallon. When compared with the usual consumption figures for standard cruise operations, which were significantly higher, the benefits of such an approach quickly became apparent. Lindberg, confident from his own extensive flight experience, having flown combat missions using these exact parameters, predicted that adopting this method could extend the Lightning aircraft's operational range considerably. Specifically, he estimated that the effective range could be increased by almost 400 meters, thus enabling missions that could last up to 9 hours, an endurance previously thought unattainable for this aircraft type. When he finalized his presentation, which lasted approximately half an hour, a heavy silence descended over the room. The assembled pilots and officers were left to grapple with difficult, perhaps uncomfortable, truths. The prospect of embarking on a 9-hour sortie raised immediate concerns among the seasoned pilots, many of whom already found standard 7-hour missions arduous and taxing on their endurance. The cockpit of the P38 Lightning was undeniably cramped, space at a premium, with pilots seated on parachutes, accompanied by emergency flotation devices and gear stored beneath them. The uncomfortable survival suits they wore only added to the discomfort. Existing experience had shown that even a 7-hour flight could push human endurance to its limits, making the idea of stretching those boundaries to 9 hours seem almost impossible and dangerously optimistic. Adding to the unease was Lindberg's recommendation to operate the engines at settings that flew directly in the face of traditional training. Military pilots had been explicitly instructed in the dangers of running engines in what was called an oversquare condition, where manifold pressure exceeds RPM by a significant margin. In particular, they had been warned that such operation could result in destructive detonation within the cylinders, leading to overheated heads and ultimately catastrophic engine failure. The prevailing doctrine emphasized that exceeding manifold pressure beyond a few inches of mercury over the RPM was a recipe for disaster, risking explosive damage that could incapacitate the aircraft and endanger the pilot's life. In stark contrast, Lindberg was now advocating for routine operation within this very oversquare regime, settings that had been strictly advised against in military flight training. The pilots in the room, well versed in these safety protocols, could not hide their skepticism. Some exchanged uncertain glances. A few shook their heads in disbelief or disapproval. One pilot went so far as to openly declare the technique dangerous, voicing the concern that deliberately pushing engines beyond their safe limits could lead to unforeseen and disastrous consequences. However, MacDonald, likely understanding the implications of Lindberg's experience, recognized a crucial point. Lindberg's assertions were not purely theoretical. He had first-hand combat flying experience with these procedures and had flown multiple missions using these settings without any engine failures. His aircraft had consistently returned with fuel reserves that exceeded typical amounts, giving him operational flexibility in ways other pilots could only dream of. This practical, real-world evidence suggested that under certain conditions, these unconventional settings might be both safe and advantageous. Eager to validate these claims, the colonel resolved to conduct a controlled, practical test of Lindberg's fuel-saving technique. If successful, the new method could provide the 475th Fighter Group with a decisive edge, offering extended range and mission duration. Conversely, a failure would be swiftly identified, allowing them to revert to proven, conventional operating parameters. Over the course of the following week, the pilots embarked on a series of cautious, incremental experiments. They began with short flights, carefully selecting conditions that minimized risks and allowed for immediate return should signs of engine distress appear. During these initial sorties, pilots closely monitored engine gauges, noting that the engines were performing within acceptable limits, with no signs of overheating or abnormal vibrations. Encouraged by these early results, they gradually increased the duration of flights, always maintaining vigilant observation of their aircraft's systems. As confidence grew, more pilots adopted the technique, with each flight reinforcing the initial findings. They observed that, with meticulous management and adherence to the prescribed parameters, namely, operating at a throttle setting of 1,600 rpm, with manifold pressure at 30 inches of mercury, and the mixture adjusted to autolean, they could sustain the engines safely over longer periods. Their airspeed remained steady. The engine responses at lower revolutions per minute revealed a pronounced difference from their behavior at higher RPM settings. As the deep, resonant growl of the Allison V1710 engines shifted tone with reduced RPM, other basic indicators remained reassuringly normal. Temperature gauges, which are critical in monitoring engine health, showed stable readings, and oil pressure stayed comfortably within acceptable, safe limits. Interestingly, the temperatures of the cylinder heads, a vital sign often associated with the risk of detonation, actually ran cooler when operating at these lower revolutions than they did at the higher RPM configurations typically used in combat or standard cruise. As pilots grew more confident in these findings, many began to incorporate Lindberg's innovative techniques into longer and more strategic missions. There was a clear, undeniable benefit: substantial fuel savings. Missions that once necessitated immediate withdrawal from the combat zone after striking their targets could now be extended with longer-lasting combat air patrols, thanks to the increased efficiency. The fuel consumption improvements translated directly into greater operational flexibility. Flights that previously required close monitoring of fuel levels, an often tense and stressful task, now concluded with generously available reserves. This breakthrough in efficiency allowed the P38 Lightning's effective combat radius to expand significantly. Originally around 570 miles, it was now stretching to 700 miles, and even further to about 750 miles in optimal conditions. Pilots discovered that they could reach targets once considered beyond the Lightning's range, stay over the target area for 15 minutes, executing their missions, and still have enough fuel to return safely with a full hour's worth of reserves. The impact of this transformation was nothing short of revolutionary. Early skepticism quickly dissipated as successive missions validated the technique's effectiveness, demonstrating both its practicality and safety. Lindberg, in particular, became a regular presence among the 475th Fighter Group, accumulating hundreds of combat hours. Through his leadership and exemplification, he not only flew missions but also mentored fellow pilots, inspiring confidence in this novel approach. He often flew as a flight leader, with a straightforward call sign, Mr. Lindberg, emphasizing his role as both a respected aviator and a teacher. Lindberg was careful to explain the underlying physics of his technique, making it accessible for pilots who might find the concept initially counterintuitive. He explained that aircraft engines generate power by burning fuel to produce pressure that moves pistons within the cylinders. The rate at which fuel is consumed, how much is burned per unit of time, is directly related to fuel efficiency. The objective, as he clarified, was to produce the required power while minimizing fuel wastage. Traditional high RPM cruise settings offered abundant power but were inefficient because the engine cycled through its combustion process rapidly, burning fuel unnecessarily and, worst of all, generating heat that could lead to engine wear or damage. By contrast, Lindberg's method involved reducing engine RPM while simultaneously increasing the manifold pressure, essentially, the pressure of the air-fuel mixture entering the cylinders. This approach enabled the same amount of power to be generated with fewer combustion cycles, which in turn conserved fuel and improved overall efficiency. Further refinement came from setting the fuel mixture leaner, just enough fuel for complete combustion, eliminating the excess fuel that was often used in auto-rich mode, which was originally intended for providing additional cooling during high-power operations like takeoff or combat. A common concern was whether such lower RPM operation could cause engine detonation. However, Lindberg confirmed it did not. Although the power settings were over square, meaning the manifold pressure was higher than the RPM, these settings did not equate to high power operation in the traditional sense. For instance, a manifold pressure of 30 inches of mercury was moderate, well below the 60 inches used during emergency combat or takeoffs. Furthermore, reducing RPM actually lowered mechanical stress on the engines, extending their longevity and reliability. Importantly, Lindberg stressed that this approach was not dangerous, rather, it was simply a different paradigm, contrasting sharply with conventional pilot training that emphasized higher RPMs for maximum power. His insights stemmed from years of extensive experience with long-range flight. His famous 1927 transatlantic crossing had demonstrated to him that the published engine specifications and recommended settings were merely starting points, not hard limits. It was within these limits that pilots could push their aircraft to achieve optimal performance. His work during the 1930s with Pan American Airways, where he oversaw trans-Pacific and transatlantic route surveys, provided him with thousands of hours of practical experimentation in fuel management and engine optimization. The P38 Lightning, with its twin-engine configuration, inherently offered a safer environment for such experimentation. If one engine suffered damage or failure, the aircraft could still maintain control and pursue its mission, which considerably reduced the risks associated with trying out new techniques. During an experimental flight, a strategic technique was employed that essentially enabled the pilot to extend the range of their aircraft significantly, ensuring that even if an engine failure occurred mid-flight, the other engine could safely carry the aircraft back to its base. This concept of flying with multiple engines in mind, especially in such a vast expanse as the Pacific Ocean, was crucial, because mechanical failures in that region meant imminent death by drowning or capture by enemy forces. Consequently, most pilots operating single-engine fighter planes adopted a cautious flying style, prioritizing safety over aggressive maneuvers. However, with the P38 Lightning, its inherent redundancy of twin engines provided a considerable safety margin, allowing pilots the confidence to explore the aircraft's operational envelope more daringly, pushing the limits of range and performance. Lieutenant Lindberg, keenly aware of the supply chain's robustness, understood that the availability of spare V-1710 engines and parts to the Pacific theater was substantial. This abundance meant that should an engine need replacement following extended experimental flights, ground crews could swiftly install a new power unit, minimizing downtime. The underlying operational benefit, namely, the ability to fly longer distances, also justified accepting a minimal increase in engine wear and tear. This strategic balance between risk and reward proved to be accurate. No engines in Lindbergh's fleet succumbed to failure as a result of his innovative cruising techniques. By the end of July in the year 1944, Lindbergh's method of cruise control had begun to spread systematically among the units of the 5th Air Force operating the P-38s. The remarkable success of the 475th Fighter Group became impossible to ignore or conceal. News of their achievements quickly circulated among other squadrons, leading to conversations among pilots eager to adopt the same effective tactics. Ground crews compared fuel consumption data meticulously, noting the efficiency gains, and commanders from different units expressed strong interest in replicating the operational advantages that Lindbergh's squadron had gained. In response to this demand, Lindbergh delivered additional instructional presentations to pilots from various units. He explained the technique thoroughly and patiently, engaging with their technical questions and addressing concerns about engine safety and longevity. Although the adoption of this method was not instantaneous and not embraced by every pilot, its consistent and steady implementation marked a significant shift in operational doctrine. A defining moment came on the 28th of July, 1944, when Lindbergh's leadership culminated in a particularly dramatic encounter with the 475th Fighter Group. The mission involved escorting bombers in a reconnaissance area near Sarum, with Lindbergh flying as flight leader, designated Blue 3, in a four-ship formation over El Puti Bay. During this sortie, the Blue Flight encountered enemy aircraft, setting the stage for a tense and fierce engagement. The adversaries were two Mitsubishi Ki-51 Sona light bombers, used by the Japanese primarily for reconnaissance and ground attack missions, which had just finished searching for a missing comrade and were returning to base. These aircraft belonged to the 73rd Independent Flying Chutai, with one pilot, Captain Saburo Shimada, serving as the commanding officer, and the other, Sergeant Yokogi, as his wingman. The American fighters launched an attack with the intent to neutralize these lighter, less maneuverable aircraft, an easier target compared to contemporary fighters. With a speed disadvantage and only light armament, the Sona bombers might have seemed an easy target, but Shimada was an experienced and resourceful pilot, resolute in resisting defeat. The ensuing aerial combat evolved into a dynamic and intense running battle. P-38s from the 9th Fighter Squadron had initially located the Sona aircraft and engaged them, and soon after, McDonald's flight arrived on the scene to assist. During the melee, Shimada's wingman, Sergeant Yokogi, was struck by cannon fire from Lieutenant Wade Lewis, which caused the left wing of his aircraft to ignite. As Yokogi's Sona attempted to retreat, Lieutenant J.C. Haslip seized the opportunity, maneuvered behind it, and unleashed a long burst of gunfire. The damaged aircraft issued smoke trails as it dove toward the sea, its crew attempting to mitigate the blaze. Meanwhile, Shimada's aircraft continued the fight with tenacity, refusing to yield. For a formidable 30 minutes, the Japanese pilots skillfully outmaneuvered multiple attacking P-38s, using aggressive banking maneuvers and maximum rate turns that caused condensation to stream from the aircraft's wingtips. Shimada continually threw his aircraft into violent, unpredictable banks, making it extremely difficult for the American pilots to hold a steady lead or aim point. Despite efforts by the P-38 pilots to establish a lock-on and fire accurately, Shimada's aircraft avoided destruction through deft flying and intense evasive tactics. This aerial duel exemplified the resilience, daring, and pilot skill that characterized Japanese pilots like Shimada. It underscored a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, whereas the chaotic skies erupted with the roar of engines and spirals of smoke, the situation grew increasingly desperate. The American fighters, eager to turn the tide of the furious combat, knew that the speediest aircraft, such as the P-38s, could pivot swiftly and strike hard when necessary. Captain Danforth Miller, serving as the wingman to MacDonald, managed a fleeting glimpse of the red-marked Sonia in his gun sight, his finger tense on the trigger. In those tense moments, he briefly lined up his shot, but just as he prepared to unleash his fire, he lost track of the enemy aircraft as Shimada expertly executed a sharp, hard turn to his left. The tracers that Miller had sent streaking through the air fell short, landing nearly 80 feet behind the fleeing Sonia, a reminder of how precise and fleeting such moments of opportunity could be during intense dogfights. Then, in an unforeseen development, Shimada did something startling. Instead of continuing on his evasive path, he suddenly reversed direction and headed straight toward the approaching Lindbergh's aircraft. The two roared towards each other on a collision course at nearly 500 miles per hour, a head-on encounter that would settle the fate of the Sonia in an instant. For Lindbergh, a pilot who had accumulated countless hours in the air but had never truly faced an opponent determined to destroy him, this moment crystallized into a scene of stark reality and critical danger. Shimada held his trajectory steady, unwavering. Whether his intent was to ram his opponent in a sacrificial attack or merely to exchange fire at dangerously close range, the Japanese captain was committed to this collision course. In response, Lindbergh instinctively focused on the Sonia's radial engine, the vital heart of the enemy aircraft, and squeezed the trigger. The armament of Lindbergh's P-38 Lightning erupted with a powerful burst, firing a 20mm cannon along with 450 caliber machine guns concentrated in the aircraft's nose. The gunfire raged for exactly 6 seconds, a relentless storm of bullets and shells that slammed into the front of the Sonia. Lindbergh kept the trigger pressed, unleashing a barrage that tore into the Japanese aircraft's fuselage and engine. The impact was evident. The Mitsubishi's propeller visibly slowed, a sign that the engine was losing power. Smoke billowed from the Sonia's engine, a sign of critical damage, yet Shimada remained unwavering, maintaining his steady course toward the inevitable. At the very last moment, Lindbergh yanked his aircraft upward with violent force, pulling his P-38 out of the deadly collision path. His plane soared over the battered Sonia, missing it by mere feet. Shimada's aircraft, unable to recover from the damage, sank into a steep dive. Multiple other P-38s, seeing their comrade in peril, fired additional bursts of their own ammunition, illuminating the sky with flashes of gunfire. The Sonia continued its descent, trailing thick black smoke and sparks of flames, until it struck the ocean at high velocity. The impact created a geyser of white spray that erupted from the point of collision, as seawater was violently displaced and sent into the air. Foam spread outward in concentric circles across the water's surface, alive briefly with the chaotic energy of the crash, before the waves quickly claimed the scene and returned the water to its calm, indifferent state. Below the surface, the aftermath was stark. Captain Saburo Shimada and his aircraft's observer had perished in the fiery death of the sinking plane. Back at the base, discussions about credit for the kill ensued among the pilots who had participated in the engagement. It was established that multiple pilots had struck the Sonia during the dogfight. MacDonald, Miller, and Lindbergh all scored hits. However, it was the deliberate, head-on burst from Lindbergh that ultimately delivered the fatal blow to the Mitsubishi. The firing disabled the propeller, slowed the engine significantly, and sent the aircraft into its final, uncontrollable dive. Unofficially, the pilots reached a consensus. Lindbergh had achieved his first, and indeed, his only, kill in combat. Yet, officially, the victory was not recorded in the 25th Fighter Group's combat record, mainly because Lindbergh was a civilian. His role in combat had already been irregular and marred by questions of protocol. Registering an official kill might have led to scrutiny that could jeopardize his standing within the unit. Just 3 days later, on the 1st of August, Lindberg's luck nearly ran out. During a fighter sweep mission over the Palau Islands, his squadron encountered a swarm of Japanese Zero fighters. A tense, sharply contested dogfight broke out, and Lindberg found himself engaged in a violent turning fight with a Zero pilot. The duel was perilous, and at one point, Lindberg's aircraft was dangerously close to being shot down. Only quick thinking and prompt intervention by MacDonald saved him. MacDonald called out, break right," while on the 12th of August in the year 1444, Major Lindberg departed from the airfield at Helandia, embarking on a journey back home that marked the culmination of a significant chapter in his wartime service. As he prepared to leave, a gathering of pilots from the illustrious 475th Fighter Group assembled to bid him farewell, their expressions marked by genuine respect and admiration. This respect was no mere courtesy. It stemmed from their deep appreciation of Lindberg's profound influence, not only as a technical advisor but also as a fellow airman who had earned their trust through action and shared adversity. Lindberg was not simply an instructor who shared techniques that could extend the fighter's operational range. He was a man who had flown among them, fought alongside them, and demonstrated his mettle in conditions where the distinctions of rank and fame became insignificant. His contribution was tangible and undeniable. The innovative flight techniques he introduced, particularly those centered around optimizing fuel efficiency, quickly proved their worth well beyond the confines of the 475th Fighter Group. By October of the same year, military units operating P38 Lightnings across the vast expanse of the Pacific Theater had begun adopting various iterations of his cruise control principles, indicating their widespread utility. While the precise numerical parameters varied slightly among different units and conditions, the core principle remained constant. These techniques involved reducing engine revolutions per minute, increasing manifold pressure, and employing a leaner fuel mixture, all coordinated strategies aimed at greatly extending the aircraft's range. The implications of these adjustments were nothing short of revolutionary. By implementing them, fighters could now cover greater distances, reaching targets previously considered inaccessible and maintaining combat effectiveness over longer periods. The strategic consequences were profound and far-reaching. Targets deep within enemy territory, once beyond the reach of fighter escort, now became accessible. Japanese military bases, areas that had enjoyed virtual immunity from interception and attack, found themselves increasingly vulnerable to sustained fighter interventions. P-38 units equipped with these fuel-saving techniques could now carry enough fuel to engage in combat, provide escort for bombers, and then safely return home, an advantage that dramatically enhanced mission scope. Furthermore, the ability to operate at extended ranges empowered fighter groups to undertake deep penetration strikes deep into Japanese-held regions. Specifically, units in Dutch New Guinea began executing patrols covering approximately 950 miles to reach their targets, engaging in combat for around a quarter of an hour, and then returning to base, all within the limits of operational feasibility. Prior to Lindberg's innovations, such long-range missions had been considered impractical, if not impossible, due to fuel constraints. Yet, thanks to these techniques, formerly infeasible operations became a routine part of the Pacific Campaign. The importance of this range extension extended well beyond tactical convenience. It played a vital role in the broader strategic efforts supporting General MacArthur's advancing forces toward the Philippines. Airfields that previously could not sustain fighter operations due to limited range suddenly became forward bases capable of supporting offensive and defensive missions. This shift allowed planning for invasions and regional advances to proceed without the previous delays caused by the necessity for closer staging points. The impact was measured not merely in miles but also crucially in time. What once might have taken months could now be achieved within weeks, radically accelerating the pace of the campaign. The ability to extend operational range had a direct effect on survival and mission success. Pilots who had previously limped back to base with fuel gauges on empty now had reserves capable of sustaining them through emergency situations. Inclement weather that would have previously forced dangerous detours, often resulting in aircraft losses, became manageable, significantly reducing non-combat casualties. Aircraft damaged in combat, which might have otherwise been lost attempting to reach home airfields within standard ranges, now had a better chance of navigating back safely, thanks to the additional fuel reserves. This technological and tactical advancement proved especially critical during the liberation of the Philippines. When General MacArthur's forces landed on Leyte in October of 1444, the P-38 fighters operating from bases in New Guinea and Morotai provided crucial air cover over distances that had once been deemed unreachable. The difference between reaching enemy targets with virtually no fuel reserves left and arriving with an hour or more of fuel remaining was the line between effective aerial protection and a mere symbolic presence. However, despite the undeniable advantages, the widespread adoption of these fuel efficiency techniques was not entirely smooth or free from controversy. Initial resistance came from some commanders who voiced concerns about the reliability and longevity of engine components under the modified operational parameters. Skepticism persisted among a faction of pilots who hesitated to trust these simplified techniques, fearing potential engine damage or unforeseen mechanical failures. Yet, as operational results accumulated and the advantages became undeniable, these concerns gradually diminished, paving the way for the techniques to become standard practice across the theater. Their training programs surpassed the ordinary advice given to civilians by a considerable margin, reflecting a focus on optimizing aircraft performance during wartime. Nevertheless, some maintenance officers expressed concern over the potential for increased wear and tear on the engines, worried that pushing engines harder might lead to more frequent failures or reduce their operational lifespan. Despite these reservations, the evidence that accumulated over time was compelling and difficult to dismiss. Units that adopted Lindberg's innovative techniques reported no noticeable rise in engine failure rates, which was a significant reassurance. Furthermore, data on fuel consumption revealed dramatic improvements, indicating that aircraft could operate more efficiently and for longer durations without refueling. Mission logs and operational reports began to document a series of successful sorties that had previously been deemed impossible, thanks to the enhanced performance enabled by these methods. By the end of the year 1944, Lindberg's cruise control technique had become formally integrated into the standard operating procedures for the P-38 Lightning, one of the most vital fighters of the Allied forces. What had initially started as a civilian technical observer's suggestion to improve engine management had, over the course of time, evolved into a core aspect of military doctrine. The United States Army Air Forces responded by updating their official cruise control charts for the P-38, explicitly reflecting Lindberg's groundbreaking discoveries. Additionally, pilot training curricula were revised to emphasize the correct operation of the lean-of-peak mixture, ensuring that flying crews could maximize aircraft performance safely and effectively. The broader narrative of Lindberg's service in the Pacific Theater reveals a complex man motivated by a mixture of technical curiosity, patriotism, and personal ambition. His earlier stance of pre-war isolationism had made him a controversial figure in aviation circles and national discourse. His candid comments regarding aviation technology development in Nazi Germany, interpreted by some as sympathetic, led to accusations that cast suspicion on his loyalties. Moreover, his outspoken opposition to American entry into the Second World War directly resulted in the rupture of his relationship with President Franklin D. Roosevelt. As a result, Lindbergh found himself shunned by many in the established military and political circles despite his reputation as one of America's most skilled and distinguished aviators. Interestingly, however, in the remote and less politically charged environment of the Pacific battlefield, Lindbergh experienced a form of redemption through his proven technical expertise and flying prowess. The pilots from the Marine Corps and Army Air Forces who flew alongside him did not judge Lindbergh based on his political positions or public statements. Instead, they recognized him for his exceptional flying skills and remarkable courage under fire. Among them was Major Richard Bong, who holds the record as America's highest-scoring ace of the war, with a total of 40 enemy aircraft shot down while serving with the 5th Fighter Command and other units across the Pacific. Bong told a United Press reporter that Lindbergh was as capable a pilot as any of the top aces he knew. Bong went further, expressing his opinion that Lindbergh undoubtedly could have been out there in the skies shooting down Japanese aircraft every day if the military command, under General Kenny, had granted him the opportunity to do so. Such a high regard from a pilot of Bong's caliber carried significant weight, more so than any political or public relations rehabilitation could provide. Lindbergh had, through his actions in combat, earned unequivocal respect and demonstrated himself to be a proven warfighter. After returning to the United States in mid-August of 1944, Lindbergh continued to contribute to the war effort from a technical and advisory standpoint. In October of the same year, he took part in a joint conference hosted by the Army and Navy to evaluate fighter aircraft performance, held at the Naval Air Station Patuxent River in Maryland. His responsibilities included flying and assessing Japanese aircraft captured during combat, providing valuable insights into the technological capabilities of the enemy's planes. Lindbergh also maintained his consulting role for United Aircraft and various other manufacturing companies, troubleshooting issues that arose during combat operations and helping to optimize aircraft performance under wartime conditions. The scope of his accomplishments in this regard demonstrates the significant impact he had on improving fighter aircraft efficiency and effectiveness. To appreciate the magnitude of Lindbergh's contributions, consider the specifications of the P38 Lightning, which had a standard internal fuel capacity of approximately 410 gallons, divided among two 90-gallon main tanks, two 60-gallon reserve tanks, and two 55-gallon leading edge tanks, with space for external drop tanks as well. Under typical cruise settings, at about 2,200 RPM and with an auto-rich mixture, the total fuel capacity could exceed 1,000 gallons, enabling extended missions. However, fuel consumption during flight varied depending on operational conditions and techniques used. The conventional consumption rates were significantly higher than what Lindbergh's optimized mixture operation could achieve. His method, carefully managing the mixture to lean of peak, reduced fuel consumption considerably, allowing aircraft to stay airborne longer and fly farther without additional refueling. The precise figures for Lindbergh's fuel savings are not readily available in this excerpt, but what is clear is that this innovative approach dramatically increased the efficiency. The combined fuel consumption for these operations was approximately 70 gallons per hour, a figure that perfectly encapsulates the significant advancements made in aerial endurance and strategic capability. These improvements in fuel efficiency directly translated into an increased combat radius, which expanded from an estimated 570 miles to about 750 miles. This set of data indicates a remarkable 31% enhancement in range, achieved while maintaining the same operational allowances for combat and reserve fuel. Such a leap meant that aircraft could now operate effectively over much greater distances without additional fuel loads. When missions demanded maximum possible range, the deployment of supplementary drop tanks alongside refined cruise techniques allowed aircraft to undertake flights nearing 9 hours in duration. These extended missions enabled coverage exceeding 1,000 miles in a single sortie, thus pushing the boundaries of operational reach significantly. The impact of these technological and tactical improvements was transformative for operations across the vast Pacific theater. The Strategic Island Hopping Campaign, an essential element of General MacArthur's push through New Guinea and onward into the Philippines, depended heavily on maintaining air superiority at each successive step. The range of fighter aircraft was a critical factor in this campaign because it directly influenced which islands could be bypassed by striking at targets from distant bases and which islands required direct assaults to establish vital airfields. The ability to reach distant targets from strategic points of departure meant that fewer amphibious landings were necessary, thereby reducing the operational risks and costs associated with such assaults. The extension of fighter range, greatly facilitated by techniques pioneered by Charles Lindberg, allowed for more daring and flexible operational planning. With increased reach, aircraft could effectively engage or bypass islands that would have previously demanded complex and expensive amphibious operations. As a result, military strategists gained the capacity to choose more efficient routes and tactics, improving overall campaign effectiveness. It is a common misconception among some historians that Lindbergh's techniques for range extension were demonstrated during the April 1943 mission that intercepted and downed Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's transport aircraft. That particular operation, conducted with P38 Lightning fighters from the 339th Fighter Squadron stationed at Guadalcanal, did push the aircraft's range to its operational limits. However, Lindbergh himself had no involvement in this mission. In reality, he had only arrived in the Pacific theater over a year later and played no direct role in the planning or execution of that specific intercept. What Lindbergh's innovations truly achieved was to normalize these extended-range missions, transforming them from extraordinary feats into routine elements of military aviation. His work laid the groundwork for consistent, reliable long-range operations, greatly expanding the strategic options available to Allied forces in the Pacific. The personal aspect of Lindbergh's contributions is particularly noteworthy. At the age of 42, he voluntarily deployed to the Pacific theater, engaging in combat missions while facing pilots who often were 20 years younger than himself. The physical demands of long-duration flights, requiring meticulous hygiene, maneuvering in cramped cockpits, and enduring the intense stress inherent in combat, took a substantial toll on all engaging pilots, Lindbergh included. Despite these hardships, he never requested special treatment or exemptions. He shared the same perilous missions as the young lieutenants and captains, the backbone of the 75th Fighter Squadron, facing identical dangers, following the same operational procedures, and demonstrating the utmost dedication. Lindbergh's willingness to personally demonstrate his fuel management and range extension techniques was vital to earning their acceptance among his peers. Had he merely issued tactical advice from the relative safety of headquarters, his insights might have been dismissed as mere theory from someone disconnected from combat realities. However, Through actively flying missions and consistently proving that his methods were effective under combat conditions, Lindberg gained a reputation and credibility that no rank or fame alone could bestow. His hands-on approach broke down skepticism and fostered trust among his fellow pilots and commanders alike. The influence of Lindbergh's success extended beyond fuel efficiency and tactical innovation. It had a profound psychological and cultural impact on military aviation. He demonstrated convincingly that civilian, technical expertise could play a crucial role in combat readiness and effectiveness. Military organizations tend to emphasize rank and military experience, which often dominate decision-making processes. However, the complexity of modern warfare, especially in the vast expanses of the Pacific, created a need for specialized technical knowledge that was often found outside traditional military channels. Lindbergh's achievements proved that civilians with relevant expertise could offer valuable contributions when given the opportunity to do so. His success encouraged military leaders to be more receptive to ideas and innovations from civilian specialists working in aircraft manufacturing, engine development, and research institutions. This shift helped foster a more collaborative approach to military technology and tactics during the war, ultimately enhancing operational capabilities and operational adaptability. Thus, Lindbergh's pioneering work in extending aircraft range not only advanced the tactical and strategic landscape of Pacific operations but also challenged existing notions about the sources of military innovation, illustrating how civilian ingenuity could fundamentally strengthen combat effectiveness when properly integrated into military practice. The collaboration between military personnel and civilian innovators played a crucial role in accelerating technological advancements throughout the duration of the conflict. This partnership, often characterized by a seamless integration of expertise from both worlds, led to rapid improvements that significantly impacted combat effectiveness. Among the aircraft that emerged from this synergy, the P38 Lightning stands out as a particularly noteworthy example, not just in terms of its design but in its contribution to innovative flying techniques pioneered by Lindberg. The P-38's distinctive twin-engine configuration was intentionally designed to provide a level of redundancy, thereby enhancing safety during risky experimentation and prolonged operational flights. This structural feature allowed engineers and pilots to push the boundaries of performance with a reduced risk of catastrophic failure, fostering an environment where innovation could flourish. The aircraft was powered by Allison V1710 engines, a choice that, despite facing some criticism over the years due to operational issues, proved to be highly responsive when managed with precision. Proper mixture control and meticulous fuel management proved crucial in extracting optimal performance from these engines. The P-38's sophisticated fuel system, equipped with multiple tanks and transfer pumps, gave pilots the ability to carefully allocate fuel, balancing weight, range, and engine performance during flight. Such careful handling was especially vital for long-range missions, which required aircraft to remain stable over extended periods of cruising, an area where the Lightning excelled significantly. Its inherent stability made it well suited for prolonged flights, an important requirement during the vast and varied theaters of World War II. By the end of the war in late 1944 and into 1945, the P-38 was increasingly phased out in certain combat zones, replaced by the more capable P-51 Mustang. The Mustang offered superior performance at higher altitudes and boasted an extended range, providing a similar fuel load but with more agility and endurance at altitude, making it an ideal upgrade for many operational contexts. Nonetheless, in the Pacific theater, the P-38 continued to demonstrate its enduring value. Its twin engines provided essential safety over vast stretches of water, reducing the risk of catastrophic loss during overwater missions. Furthermore, its potent armament allowed it to deliver formidable firepower, often turning the tide of aerial engagements. The Lightning's agility at low and medium altitudes made it particularly well suited to the combat conditions prevalent across the Pacific. Its significant range, especially when pilots employed Lindberg's innovative techniques, remained exceptional, capable of reaching distant targets and supporting long-range missions. In fact, the final tallies of combat achievements provide compelling evidence of the aircraft's effectiveness. The 475th Fighter Group, which flew exclusively P-38s, achieved a remarkable total of over 551 aerial victories, establishing itself as the top P-38 unit throughout the war. Among the many distinguished pilots was Major Thomas Maguire, America's second highest scoring ace during that period, who scored an impressive 38 victories flying with the 475th Fighter Group. The combination of the P-38's extensive range, powerful armament, and dependable performance made it the dominant fighter aircraft in its theater of operations. Lindbergh's pioneering techniques further amplified the aircraft's capabilities by enhancing operational range and efficiency. Missions could be extended farther afield, flights could be sustained longer, and pilots could return safely despite the demands of combat. Over countless sorties and hundreds of thousands of flight hours, the cumulative effect of these innovations and operational practices proved to be both profound and irrefutable. The narrative of the P-38 also underscores the complex relationship between specialized expertise and institutional bureaucracy. Lindbergh's outspoken political views prior to the war had rendered him an outsider, temporarily sidelined from official military service, especially due to President Franklin Roosevelt's personal antagonism towards him. Despite these institutional barriers, the Army Air Forces recognized the vital importance of Lindbergh's expertise. To harness his knowledge, an unconventional solution was devised. Lindbergh continued to contribute as a civilian, maintaining an informal authorization that allowed him to participate in combat planning and operations, an arrangement that was irregular and would be considered a breach of modern regulations, but was ultimately effective. This pragmatic approach to operational necessity revealed how bureaucracy often gives way to the exigencies of war, allowing innovation and expertise to flourish in ways that might otherwise be hindered by rigid regulations. The benefits of this informal cooperation were enormous, profoundly influencing the outcome of aerial combat and supporting the broader war effort. The pilots who flew alongside Lindbergh during that transformational period never forgot his contributions or the lessons he imparted. Decades later, in interviews, many of these veterans spoke with deep respect about the civilian aviator who had flown with them as an equal, inspiring them to push beyond their perceived limits. Colonel Warren Lewis, commander of the 432nd Squadron, vividly recalled Lindbergh's precise fuel-saving settings many years after the war, demonstrating how indelibly Lindbergh's teachings had been etched into their operational routines. While specific details varied slightly depending on the aircraft model and combat conditions, the underlying principles remained universal, emphasizing efficiency. On the 26th day of the month, in the year 1974, a man of humble origins and extraordinary dedication departed from this world, succumbing to leukemia at the age of 72 within the quiet comfort of his own home nestled in Kipahula, Maui. His passing marked the end of a life rich with service, innovation, and quiet resilience. Prior to his death, he had clandestinely left the confines of Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center located in New York City on the 17th of August. Remarkably, he arrived in Maui just a week before he passed away, having made a private journey across the vast United States to reach his final resting place. His interment was conducted with modest dignity only hours after his departure from life. The burial took place in a straightforward, handcrafted coffin, assembled by local Hawaiian ranch cowboys dressed in their work clothes, simple men whose labor speaks of rugged practicality and respect. The grave, situated at Palapala'hu Church Cemetery, was dug 30 feet into the earth, lined with black volcanic rocks and smooth black beach pebbles, symbolizing a connection to the land he loved. Only a small gathering of 15 close friends and family members attended the funeral, emphasizing the intimate and unpretentious nature of the farewell. Marking the resting place is a plain concrete slab, inscribed with an epitaph from Psalm 139, a poetic reminder of the divine omnipresence and the infinite reach of the human spirit. Reflecting on his life and contributions, one might recall his wartime journals, which were published in the year 1970. These writings offer a detailed chronicle of his service in the Pacific Theater, capturing not only the strategic complexities but also the personal experiences that shaped his understanding. Among his wartime activities, his association with the 475th Fighter Group stands out, where he contributed deeply to the aerial combat efforts of the United States in the Pacific region. The significance of Lindbergh's service in the Pacific goes far beyond the mere technical skills he imparted. His work exemplified fundamental principles that continue to resonate, emphasizing that mastery of technology alone is not enough. Leadership, insight, and relentless innovation are equally vital. In military contexts, technical competence remains paramount, especially in extending the operational ranges demanded by intense combat environments. Moreover, his story underscores that civilian experts, those outside formal military hierarchies, can make impactful contributions when given the opportunity to share their specialized knowledge. His experience demonstrates that the structures and procedures of large institutions should be continuously questioned and refined whenever evidence suggests improvements, fostering a culture of progress. Personal demonstrations, where individuals showcase their methods and results firsthand, have a far greater persuasive effect than abstract discussions alone. Perhaps most profoundly, Lindbergh's life teaches us that systems often thought to be optimal are always susceptible to refinement. No matter how advanced or well-established a system appears, there is always room for development, innovation, and enhancement. In the broader scope of his achievements in the Pacific, Lindbergh embodied a rare synthesis of expert knowledge and the acute demands of military operations, an intersection where precise application of skills could truly change the course of events. Specifically, the Pacific Theater presented unique challenges, facing fighters that needed extraordinary ranges, capabilities that standard procedures failed to fully support due to operational limitations. Lindbergh's mastery in fuel management and efficiency, cultivated over decades of meticulous focus, positioned him uniquely to address these challenges. He possessed invaluable knowledge that he was able to apply directly in combat conditions, impartially measuring and optimizing fuel consumption where success could be quantified objectively. Demonstrating remarkable courage, Lindbergh personally tested and showcased his techniques, often risking his own safety to validate the methods he believed in. His approach was characterized by humility and respect. He worked alongside pilots as an equal, eschewing notions of arrogance or fame, and instead fostering a collaborative environment grounded in shared expertise. His example and confidence inspired others, reinforcing the power of first-hand demonstration in advancing technological progress. The story of German prisoners of war witnessing the might of American industry and technology vividly exemplifies how psychological change can occur through tangible, overwhelming evidence of national strength. Their initial resistance transformed into awe and acknowledgement of the capabilities built through innovation and effort. Similarly, Lindbergh's narrative highlights how technical transformation, an evolution driven by demonstrated expertise, can have profound psychological and operational impacts. Both stories reveal an overarching truth: that the greatest victories are often achieved not through sheer brute force but through the precise application of knowledge, skill, and the power of example. These lessons remind us that perseverance, innovation, and the willingness to challenge existing limits are often more effective than brute strength alone. The prisoners, returning home with a deeper understanding of the might of the American industrial and technological efforts, left with the realization that democratic prosperity could generate abundance and progress. Meanwhile, the fighter pilots trained by Lindbergh acquired techniques that significantly amplified their combat effectiveness, enabling them to return safely no matter how difficult the mission. The P-38 Lightning aircraft continued to fly on until the conclusion of the war. Its distinctive twin sailors, aviators, and explorers alike have long understood that true mastery of their crafts often hinges on a deep comprehension of the tools they wield. Such understanding, when truly grasped, can reveal capacities and potentials that are often overlooked at first glance, capabilities that lie quietly in plain sight, waiting to be unlocked by those with the insight to recognize them. This profound concept forms a core part of Lindbergh's enduring legacy in the Pacific theater, a legacy that is not merely built upon the tangible triumphs of specific combat victories or the multitude of missions successfully flown. Instead, it is rooted in the dissemination of knowledge, the sharing of technical insights and innovative techniques, gained through observation, experience, and a relentless pursuit of understanding. Lindbergh arrived as a spectator, an outsider scrutinizing the operational environment, but he departed as a mentor, a teacher whose influence transformed the way pilots thought about their aircraft and their mission. From the moment he stepped into that environment, Lindbergh's influence went far beyond the presence of a celebrity or a distinguished visitor. It became a catalyst for change that elevated the capabilities of everyone he interacted with. His journey from observer to instructor was driven by a conviction that often, the key to greater performance and safety lay in a simple yet profound revelation. That understanding the true functioning of the aircraft, how each part interacted, how resources were utilized, and how to operate within, or even beyond, published limits, could profoundly impact outcomes. This insight empowered the pilots of the famed squadron known as Satan's Angels, a unit renowned not only for their bravery and skill but also for their innovative approach to aerial combat. They recognized that their newfound knowledge, shared generously by Lindbergh, an outsider with an unparalleled grasp of fuel efficiency and resource management, had tangible benefits. It allowed them to extend their operational range, conduct longer engagements, and execute their missions with greater safety. The core of this transformation was simple yet revolutionary: a clear understanding of the aircraft's true capabilities and the management of resources with exacting precision. This approach dismissed the notion that the limits listed in manuals were absolute constraints, limits that must be accepted without question. Lindbergh embodied this principle, living by it with conviction, and during the summer of 1944, for 6 intense weeks, he imparted this philosophy to some of the most talented fighter pilots. Serving in the Pacific, these pilots, in turn, became conduits for this vital knowledge. They shared what they learned with their peers, creating a ripple effect that spread across the theater. As this understanding took hold, it fundamentally altered the way America waged its air campaigns in the Pacific. The lessons Lindbergh demonstrated and the techniques he taught proved to be some of the most significant technological advancements of the entire Pacific Air War. advancements that came not from laboratories or engineering teams, but from one man's mastery of an art he had refined over a span of nearly 17 years, beginning with his pioneering flights across the Atlantic Ocean. What made this mastery so powerful was its adaptability. It was applied in different contexts, with different aircraft, and yet it retained its effectiveness. The same principles that served Lindberg in the early days of transatlantic flight proved just as invaluable in the high-stakes, fast-paced combat environment of World War II. The fundamental idea remained unchanged: a comprehensive understanding of the aircraft, meticulous resource management, and a refusal to accept the myth that published limits represented insurmountable barriers. Lindberg exemplified this approach every day of his teaching and flying, living by a simple but profound truth. Mastery is achieved not simply through technical knowledge, but through the deliberate, insightful application of that knowledge in real-world situations. For the 6 weeks of that pivotal summer, he became a catalyst, passing on these essential lessons to a select few. Lessons that would ultimately influence countless others. In doing so, Lindberg's teachings ignited a shift in the strategic mindset of American fighter pilots, permanently transforming how they approached aerial combat in the vast and challenging expanse of the Pacific theater. Through this sharing of knowledge, a legacy was forged, one that would forever mark the evolution of aerial warfare in the mid-20th century.